All right, we are live on YouTube. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, welcome. News? Do we have any news? I don't think we do. I don't think we have anything.
Other than any new catalogs? I know they just sent out an LGB catalog out or LGB info out. Let's see here.
Yeah, they're still waiting for the new catalog to show up. I don't know
The
when those are coming
2022 2023 catalog.
in. Yeah.
Could be. Anything new on your end as far as interesting things coming up as far as the train goes? How's the club?
No, I don't know. Nothing that I can think of right at the moment.
Okay.
Apparently we're not prepared for this.
Seems like it. Yeah, we're a little bit late. We were actually talking some nerd stuff, and then we realized, oh, it's already 11. We should start the meeting. So I got caught up. All right. So, yeah, I don't really have any news. Why don't we quickly, I don't know, just call it filler, if you will. What did I do with the browser here? Just quickly address. So for those of you, here's something we can just kind of say. Your software versions, current software versions 2.4.0 parentheses 5 is for the Central Station 3. I did notice what I think it was last week that I had an update, and I don't really know what it did. It was really quick. So,
I think it was icons.
Yeah, it could be icons filled in. I don't know if that really changes the software version.
No, it doesn't. There's still the same software version. They've done that before where they just update the icons and yeah, really nothing. The version number doesn't change anything. So I didn't bother putting it in the newsletter that was in there.
Yeah, just keep an eye for your red dots here up in the system icon over here in the upper left corner. For those who are not familiar with it, you see a red dot in the lower corner. When you click on it, you actually have another red dot down here, and when you open the system panel, this green check mark will be a red dot, and then you'll have an icon similar to the one on the left here over here, which initiates the download. I think they actually changed that icon a little bit, so now it's a little clearer that it's actually downloading something. So that
it has an arrow that kind of goes.
Yeah, initially they didn't have that arrow, so we didn't really know what it was for. Central Station 2, old 4.3.0 parentheses 5 as well. That would generally just initiate any kind of updates that accommodate newer MFX decoders. That it's sort of like you only had 16 functions on a CS2, and now you'll be able to access all 32. That's been out for quite a while now.
Yeah.
And the mobile station version 2s, which includes either the black or the gray version, 3.148. Mobile stations can only be updated via a connection to a central station. So
I did have a call. Speaking of that, I did have a call the other day about the new wireless mobile station. Whether it would make the central station wireless also, as in would it make the central station Wi-Fi so you didn't have to plug it into your router? And I said, yeah, probably not. You folks, you got to remember, we don't get any data on this beforehand. We don't even know it's coming out until we see the new items brochure, like you guys do. But I would not expect the central station to be Wi-Fi because of a mobile station box. Even though it says it's a LAN box, no, I don't think so. But
is that posted on? Do you know if it's posted on their website?
The item might be. I don't know the item number off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't either. We could look at those.
Yeah, if we could look at the manual, if the manual's up on the website, yeah, that would probably answer some questions. But
I want to see if I can find it. By the way, your radio is actually coming through, so
I shut it off.
Okay.
So that begs the question: how do you update? I assume the update will come wirelessly from the central station once you plug your wireless module into. I guess you would plug it into the central station. I mean, we really don't know, but I would assume because it's a wireless mobile station, it would have to get the updates wirelessly. So probably through the wireless box that it comes with.
And so for you folks out there, yeah, there's really not a whole lot of detail on that. Here you go. Pull it out here. So the part number is 60667. Let's see what this little diagram is here. So let's see, the CS3 looks like it still needs to be plugged into the router, and that the CS3, then the mobile station. Yeah, so it's basically a net-based product.
Okay.
So your CS3 still is the command station that needs to be plugged into the router, and the mobile station should be able to speak to it, the CS3. It actually goes through the router, so
Yeah.
it's not too different from what you're doing with your mobile device.
Yeah.
It probably should be a little bit more efficient because it's more proprietary rather than your mobile device having to go through whatever processes internally and then addressing the router.
Scroll down a little bit. Downloads.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Okay.
It's blank. Or
No.
at least I think it was. Well, hang on. There you go. There was something there. I didn't see it earlier. It was just this is in German. There's the image.
This is in English.
Yeah, it's just this really kind of detailed it. Declaration of conformity. So that's probably nothing. That was just after.
But there's nothing in that other arrow. That one.
No, it's already exposed.
Okay.
So.
Well, there you go. We know nothing.
Handle pop socket, single hand operation with a handle pop socket included. Looks like they're coming with an attachment for it that I guess you can plug in. Maybe it clips to your belt for nerds that really want to clip it to your belt. Backlit graphics display, solenoid production description, publications, compatible products. But the diagram pretty much says it here, folks. So that's a receiver box. Oh, I wonder if this is an extra. No, it shouldn't be. This receiver box, maybe it has to do, shoot, this is interesting. Maybe the receiver box allows you to connect just the mobile station wirelessly without the central station 3. So again, we don't have any information. It's just speculation at this point. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't write us with complaints. So.
See, that's what I kind of thought. It had a box, and I assume that plugs into the track box of your mobile station.
Yeah, I think this diagram simply relates if you have the CS3, then you won't need this box. But if you don't, here you go. See, there's another diagram. So okay. If you have a 60116, that's the box that works with the mobile station.
Yes.
You can plug this into it, and this is for users who do not have a central station 3.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. We learned something.
Answered our own questions.
Yeah.
Just for the benefit of our viewers. Thank you, viewers.
That's all we have for today. Goodbye.
Yeah, we're done. That's our big accomplishment for today.
Yeah, we earned it.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, so if we kind of cover, if we want to get our topics out of the way, I know mine's actually a little bit larger than yours. You covered the digital cranes, right?
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Those are non-digital cranes, were they?
No, those are digital.
Those are digital? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I covered a little bit of the history of the rotary crane, the stationary crane, just for reference, because it just seemed relevant at the time, because that led into the first digital crane, which is right here. For those of you who noticed, I do have them all stacked behind me. Anyway, well, why don't
they're not stacked in release order?
Well, I stacked them in box size because all of those would have to be teetering on top of that little crane on top. So, okay, I got lazy. All right.
The heaviest one is on the bottom.
You know, they all weigh about the same.
Yeah. No, and I just that the bottom one is the cool one because that's the one that actually has the wireless control.
It has the wireless. Let me share my screen. And, you know, I wasn't going to drag these out to set them up. You have to let
Do you
me
need
share.
sharing? Yeah.
Even though it would have been cool, it just would have been a royal pain to
You're
do
set.
that. So I opted not to.
Yeah, you're set, so you can share.
Okay, so here we have obviously my article, and you can see that I have the first crane set up here. Anyway, I didn't actually know this, even though I have all the cranes, have every version. Um, the motorized cranes came out in 1949. I thought it was more like in the 60s, early 60s, but I was way wrong. 1949 was the first motorized crane, and that first one, it had a spotlight on it, and the on the end of the cable, the string, instead of the hook the later ones came with, the kind of the flat hook, it actually had a ball, and then a hook underneath it. So those are things, and an extra ladder going up the cabin instead of just up the superstructure underneath the cabin. Then they obviously made that 7051 crane for years and years and years up until 2002. So basically from 1949 to 2002, they made this same crane, which I love these cranes. That's why I used to get them on eBay just to fix them, and I'd sell them probably for a loss. I don't remember, but I'd sell them, and that's when you could get parts for them. But now I don't know what parts are available. Probably almost nothing, if anything. I'd love to see Marklin come out with this again, because this is always a lot of play value, a lot of accessories, so to say, that Marklin comes out with. You don't actually use them the way you do in real life. Okay, so the Goliath crane on the rails, you're not actually going to pull the outriggers out. You're not going to put a locomotive or a car back on the track that derailed with your Goliath crane. It's just not going to happen. But it is a very cool accessory. So why wouldn't you have it? It's just awesome. You can have it on siding and play with it there. But the crane that Marklin came out with, like I said, from 1949 2002, this one you can actually load cars because it has the electromagnet. And when I was a kid, even though it was M-Track, the best thing I found to load was BBs. And as long as you were careful and you didn't drop them on the track, which would short the track because they're metal BBs on a metal track, you're fine. I had a lot of fun with that as a kid, and so I guess that's why that was the first accessory I bought with my own money back in, I don't know, 1982. I rode my bike. It's probably around 15 miles to the train store. Rode my bike, didn't tell my dad or anything. Went and I wanted to get a turntable, but the guy only had a used one. I didn't want to use one. He had a brand new crane. I bought it, rode back home on my bike with it, and yeah, there you go. That's the history of the cranes for me. So in what do I say here? In 2000 and when did the well, they went to a digital version in 1992, and that's this crane down here on the bottom. That's the digital version. The different versions were, you could tell by the paint color. The cabin was blue. There was no control box. After that, they came out with a retrofit to make your old cranes digital, just like this 7651. And it actually looks like this. Okay, there's the um, 7652, the retrofit for the crane. It just came in a box. It was just a decoder. You wired it up to the bottom just like the digital crane, and off you go. You're running it digitally with the 6021 controller. So the 6021 would treat it as a locomotive, and basically it's only got two motors and a function. And so it was very simple, very good idea to upgrade older cranes with it. And then they came out with the below baseboard mounting kit, which here I have a picture of 5. I have 5 of these things, which are nowadays are extremely rare. You never see them anywhere, and if you do, they're usually used, and they're the old parts from the crane when somebody mounted their motors underneath the track. So I someday intend on using these on all my cranes, but as of right now, they're just basically worth their weight in lead, let's say. Not quite gold yet. Okay, so that's basically the history. When did this crane come out? 2003. The gantry crane. I think it's called a gantry crane. I'd have to check on the box, but this one came out in 2003. It has the gantry. It has a wireless remote control. It has a baseboard which the gantry travels on. It's underneath this styrofoam. I'm not going to dig it out because it's kind of a pain. Buying one of these used is kind of dodgy because they are so fragile. The superstructure in here is it's all plastic. It's in this styrofoam very tight, and so you got to be very gentle when you pull these out. Most likely, if you buy one used, if you get it with the box, it probably won't have all the original packaging. It's going to be, you just got to be careful with it. Okay, so it came with this wireless remote, which is, I think it said it was Logitech on the back. People that make, computer mice and keyboards. And what was cool about this was obviously it was wireless. You didn't have to hook it up to your central state or your 6021 at the time. It had this receiver box, so you could control your crane as a game controller. Came with a magnet, just like the old crane. This is before they started putting their own clamshells on it, so it had the magnet. Now, the cabin can travel up and down this gantry. It's motorized. The gantry can travel up and down on its tracks on the base, and then you have full rotation of the cabin on its base, and then the cable pay out up and down, and then the function of the magnet. So that gives you 6 functions. So when you enter this into a mobile station or central station, it takes 2 addresses. It sees it as 2 locomotives, and one is for the gantry to move, let's say, forward and back. All the rest of the functions for the cabin are on its own address. So once you get the gantry where you want it, you can move the cabin left and right. You can rotate it. You can go up and down with the hook, and you can turn on and off the hook. But with the that's with the central station or mobile station. With the wireless remote, you have all the controls on one. On the top of the remote, there's a trim, so you can adjust the speed of how fast the gantry will move. I noticed 2 things on this, which I mentioned later in my article. Is one, if you push the magnet off button, it's a momentary. It turns the magnet on until you let go of the button, and then it turns the magnet off. So it's kind of a momentary. There is an on and off for the magnet, but if the magnet is off and you push off, the magnet turns on as long as you hold the button down, which was kind of a neat feature. So the trim, the magnet off button, which turns it on momentarily. The other thing was F4 would make that whole gantry move real fast. It's like it gives it full speed. And it actually jerks a lot. If you have any load on the hook, it will actually make it swing a lot. So I don't know what that is, whether it's an error, whether it's something they planned on doing, but I don't see why you would need to move a gantry in an emergency that fast. So that's not really something you could do. What's nice about this gantry is it'll move. It starts off slow and goes fast, and then when you let go of the button, it slows down and stops. It's automatic. You can't turn that acceleration braking delay off, which makes it look very realistic. Okay, so that was the gantry crane. The next one that came out in, I think, 2000, let's see, this was 2003, so it'd probably be around 2004. Yeah, 2004 was the coaling station. Let me zoom in here a little bit on the coaling station. Okay, so this is basically like the gantry crane. The same cabin, different boom. Is the first clamshell from Marklin. The crane superstructure down below travels up and down its tracks, which is the baseboard. It isn't pictured here. And the cabin will rotate 360 degrees and the cable will go up and down, and then you have the clamshell to load and unload in your coaling station here.
Is it more precise to say that the gantry moves from side to side rather than up and down?
Well, front, back, left, right, up, down, and 360.
Oh, we're talking about the actual crane.
Okay. You want to be all nerdy about it?
I didn't know if you were talking about the motion of the
Yeah, I should say back and forth or left and right. Basically, this superstructure on the crane the coaling station will move back and forth on tracks on the base station. So there is one less direction of movement on this, which means that when you enter this into your mobile station or central station, it only takes one address. So the convenient thing when this came out in, what did I say, 2004, I think? I'd have to look again. This was controllable with the same wireless that the gantry crane was controllable. They made two cranes and they were both controllable with this wireless remote. Now you couldn't have them both connected at the same time, but you could control one or the other with the wireless and the other one with your controller on the layout. So I could easily see, like I say in the article, a toggle switch to switch back and forth from one to the other. Just the wiring of the crane to this box right here would be easy enough to do, but then you're kind of, you don't want to control a crane with two controllers, so you really got to be careful. Even back in the 6021 days, they said you can't have your cranes connected to this wireless box and a 6021 at the same time. So it's only one controller for one crane at a time. The next crane that came out, if I can look at my article here, this was the stationary crane, just like kind of a newer version of the 6051 up here at the top, or 6051, 7051, 7651. More like the 7651 because it was digital. This came out in 2008, and it would not move. The base would not move, but the cabin would rotate 360 degrees. It comes with a clamshell, and that would go up and down and activate the clamshell. At the time, you could order an extra magnet, and then you could use it, just like your old crane with the electromagnet. So I don't know if you can still get those electromagnets, even if you do happen to have one of these cranes. But again, all of these cranes have a plastic boom. The bases are plastic also, although this one is pretty sturdy. This one might actually be metal. I didn't take it out to check it. I did not have the thought to do that. So that's basically a rundown of the cranes. And they haven't made one since, except the only ones that have been made have been on the rails. So it's been it first came out with, you know what, that's what I got to do next, is the rail cranes. Yeah, I may need some pictures of your Goliath. I may have to borrow your Goliath. Oh wait, yours doesn't work. You haven't fixed it yet. So, anyway, when I put this in my mobile station, you can see in the picture that it loads as two different addresses. There's the crane bridge and the crane cabin in German. 76500 is the gantry that moves back and forth. The 76500B is the cabin, which moves left and right, and rotates 360 degrees. So I loaded it with the 76500 first, I believe. No, you know what? I did the crane house, the cabin. And it came up with this jumble on the top. And now this could be my mobile station. It could have been just some kind of read error. I don't know. I was still able to control the crane, although it loaded the wrong address. So I went through the manual and I checked through the mobile station. It was like 2 addresses off. I put in the correct address and the crane worked fine, even though I had this jumble at the top. So somewhere it, loaded somehow not the wrong thing, but there was an error in loading it. What I did was I didn't delete it. I did a factory reset on my mobile station, because this is one I have on my workbench that when I do a conversion, I test locomotives with it briefly. So it really didn't matter. I could erase all the data in it and start fresh. And so I did, and then it loaded correctly. And it had the right address and it worked correctly. So it was some kind of glitch. I don't know what it was. Not being a computer nerd, I wasn't really going to try and figure it out, but I did want to see if it loaded incorrectly every time, which it didn't. Once I was able to load it in there, I had full access to it. I could control it just like with a central station, with a 6021, or with the wireless control. Same functions. The central station will do the same thing in the database. It will have 2 addresses. I think this is probably a problem, so to say. Not really a problem, but a result of the old technology, that it gives it 2 addresses, because obviously the central station is capable of multiple, 31 functions. But I believe the crane was built, and the electronics are built for 2 addresses. So they're hardwired in there, so to say, to the addresses. And
is that similar to the first big boy train that had 2 decoders in it?
yeah, I believe that loads with 2 addresses also in the central station. So that's just the way it is. It's not a fault of the central station. It's the limit of the technology of the time when the crane was built. Let's see. So after that, I got into the wireless control, explaining the buttons that I explained earlier, where it would move the gantry very fast, the momentary button for the magnet, and the trim for the motor speed on the wireless controller. All of those things you can do with the wireless controller, but you can't do with the mobile station or central station, with the exception of the F4, which made the gantry run very fast, and I don't recommend doing that. So, that is about it for the crane. And let's see, stop sharing. Needless to say, I've always been a fan of the cranes, probably because I had so much fun playing with mine as a kid.
Cool.
And there you have it.
Do we have any questions from anybody? Any viewer have anything that they'd like to ask?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because These are hard to find. I don't even see them on the secondary market anymore. I think there's one out there now, but somebody wants like $900 for it, which is outrageous. That's like double the list price back in 2002 ish.
This was for which one?
That was the gantry crane, the first one with the wireless.
Rarities, rarities. Hard to find those.
Yeah.
So. Well, all right. Okay. Should we move on to the next segment? Unless anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. It looks like we have a question out here. Yes. Is there a decoder that can drive the two motors of the crane without a relay?
Not a well. You can set. I've seen people or articles that people have done where they've used motor locomotive decoders, and the 6060. What is it? What's the AC decoder number? 60906. The 60906 decoder should do it. You would have two decoders to run it, but that one should do it because that's for AC motors. But I've also seen.
It's kind of an interesting question because, I mean, when you're talking about the two motors, you're usually talking about like two different functions.
Right, there's no single decoder to run the old. I'm assuming you're talking the old 7051 stationary crane. Um, I've seen where people have controlled them through M83s, well, K83s and K84s at the time, but an M83, M84, you should be able to wire it the same, and then control it digitally. And any I said this in the article, any accessory that you can control digitally with your central station, you can enter into an event script and have it run a sequence automatically.
It gets tricky. Well, the reason why I think it's interesting, especially with the digitally controlled stuff, is you can with the digitally controlled stuff, those two motors, they're obviously based on functions, and I know you can activate both functions, and then when you turn the speed control knob, it actually turns both motors on. But it's not synchronous, and like if you want one to go fast and the other one's slow, you can't do it that way because it's actually giving the same output command to each of those functions. And then in regards to what Rick was mentioning, like if you create an event where you actually have a sequence of events, because I tried that. Remember, I did that with that little track crane.
Mm-hmm.
The on that first yellow one,
Yeah.
we were messing with Tom's head back in the day. We tried to get it to put it back in the box. Essentially, I tried to do a sequence where, you want the crane to go up, you want it to rotate 90 degrees, and then you wanted to cycle it, so it would mimic the exact same action. Well, the problem that we found out was it is imprecise. So let's say you
There's
have
no
the crane.
encoder.
Well, no, yeah, you had the crane set for 12 o'clock position, right? And then you wanted it to rotate 90 degrees like that. Well, it would work once, but then when it returned back, it would overshoot, and then you'd have like this sequence where it wouldn't actually be precise.
Right.
And there was no way to really control that because it's not position based. It was more or less timing based.
Yes, and that's what I should have said that in the article also. It goes by time. It records time. The motor is set for this amount of power for this amount of time. That doesn't mean that motor is going to stop in the same spot. And I should have qualified that. If you're just doing a sequence of a crane, you're not going to be able to automatically set it to unload a load with a train underneath it. But if you were just running a sequence to make it move up and back and forth, left and right, up and down to simulate some kind of movement, that you can do. If you don't want it, it doesn't have to be precise.
Yeah, it won't be precise. Yeah, I attributed to the fact that when you have a computer device and let's say you give it like 5 functions, what happens is the computer just it doesn't exactly time everything out. It sort of does everything in a sequence. In other words, it's going to accomplish those 4 tasks. So let's say you have, you're trying to do this precise sequence, and the timing is going to be different if you are operating, let's say, 3 trains at the same time as opposed to 7 trains at the same time. You're adding clock cycles, which actually delays precision timing for certain events. So
Right.
you have to be aware of that if you're thinking of doing something that detailed. So
And like I said, there's no encoder in the in any of these, so that it knows what position any function of the crane is in. Let's say any motor position or boom position or whatever you want to call it. Like the turntable, the turntable basically has an encoder. The outer ring is the encoder disc, and the bridge is the reader. So um, that's why that's so precise, and it knows when and where to stop. There's nothing like that on the on any of these cranes. Okay,
all right.
we bored everyone to death now with
Well,
that.
people move on. They have stuff to do. Lost one viewer. Okay, so should I cover the boring stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Grab your milk and blankets, kids. It's time to take a nap.
Here we go.
There we go.
Okay, so in this article, I wrote about basically certain controlling of sort of a specific track operation that I had employed some years back on a previous layout. Rick knows it fairly well. Let me show the diagram of what we did. And this is basically controlling merging traffic from one line, from 2 different lines. And you can see here I have 2 signals, and this is basically the setup of equipment that we used. The sensor over here is basically to control what can enter into this block at one time. So the first event that we need to create, and it's the simplest one, is basically if I have 2 trains waiting here, or even just one, and if the train is released where it can go forward, oops, apply power delay it like this, then we want to be sure that the signal here, whatever color it is red. So we use these control functions here. We're going to use these sensors to control the events. So let me create an event. And let's just kind of get rid of these, because I don't want to confuse folks. Edit events. Yes. All right, so the first event we're going to do is we're going to actually create an event and call it track 1. Okay. And notice up here, this keyboarding window up here for you folks that you don't know, it is at the default setting, but I've typed it down in this window. If you click this check mark here, it's just going to default to that title. So if you want to make sure you transfer this title over, just click on it once and it just shifts it up here. So that's sort of a bug that we've kind of discovered a while ago. It can be kind of annoying at times. So essentially what happens is the train is releasing here, so we want to use control 1 as our trigger. And the simple action is basically we just want it to make sure that signal goes red, so that if there's a train on the opposing track that's approaching, it won't actually cross in while this train on this line is entering into the single block. So that's our first control. Create another one, do the opposite. Okay, 2. I can't shift these windows around. So you can see that real estate sometimes it gets annoying because you really only have a limited window that you can see. So this is actually going to be track control 2, and I want to make sure that it changes to red. Okay. Okay, so now we need to close this. So this is going to be an abbreviated version of the article. If you want more details, I suggest you really do read the newsletter article. So this is how we control, at least when the train comes through, ensures that we don't have opposing traffic running into it. Now, our release figures, so in any sense, if there's any kind of train waiting here, and there's a train on this block, obviously, we don't want any train to enter into the same block because there's already a train going through it. So what happens is once we allow this block to clear in between these controls, the cursor is, we're basically going to use a trigger here that once the train releases the trigger, it's already well past the signal, and we can actually set that to go red. And then we can go through the process of releasing one of these trains, and we'll actually go to attach that now. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create that event here for this block. And that's going to be the control here. This icon, you can see it's sort of showing the train approaching like a reed switch, or what was it, the circuit track. That's the flipper switch for the slider. We are using contact tracks for this instructions, but it's the same icon, so it doesn't really matter. What we're going to do is we're going to actually have it so it triggers when the train leaves that section of track. And you'll notice that I changed the position so it's gray, and you'll see that this icon here on the left will change. So that makes sure that's set. By default, we want to be sure that at one point or another, we're going to make sure that this is going to stop any train from going past the signal onto that train that's now on this section of track on the far right. So now our controls get a little bit confusing because I have 4 conditions that you need to be aware of, and I'm not going to title this right now, and we'll just leave it at FS3. And those 4 conditions are going to be, let me just show you quickly. They're going to be whether or not you have a train on this bottom line waiting to go and no train on the top. You're going to have a train on the top line and no train on the bottom, or you can have 2 trains at either end or no trains at either end. So these are your 4 conditions. So what we want to do is we're actually going to use macros to address those 4 conditions because it actually makes our overall programming easier. So I just need to create a holder because that's the only way sometimes to generate macros. So if I click on the edit here, I can actually add a macro. So we're going to add a macro, and we're going to do macro ands. Now macro ands are basically our variances when we want to create 4 of these, and I'm just going to leave it labeled as and 1. And the condition is we'll set up our first one, and we're going to drag. I get this so you guys can see. Close that up. So it's going to show whether or not the train is occupying 1 and 2. That's this state. Okay, and how we change it is we can go in there and we make sure that they are both showing as empty. So that just means there's nothing on either of these tracks. Okay, whoops, scrolling. All right, so that's our first condition. Let me open up my events window again. Sorry, I got to get these windows out of the way because Zoom is interfering with my ability to press buttons. Okay, so I can close that. I'm going to, let's see if I can actually create another and. This is and 2. Let's drag this down here. So we'll drag the same 2 icons, only this time we're going to have one as off. And that's occupancy 2 is off. That means there's only a train waiting on this side and no trains waiting on that side. Oops. And so there's two ands, their third and just basically be the same sort of trigger. Whoops. Notice I just kind of click the add a macro. This is actually the macro. I have to add the macro and this way. And it creates an and holder. And that means that it's this function. So that's kind of kludgy. It gets a little confusing when you do it that way, but you know, there's no refined way to do it. The steps are all kind of awkward. Hopefully at one point you'll get used to it and you figure it out. But even though I've done it for a while, I still sort of fumble and have to go back and forth between the two different methods. So this is the third condition, and then now I have the fourth condition. This is easier for clarity. Create the macro and then the fourth condition is basically where you have a train occupying both lines. Okay. So now what we do is if we, did I actually save that? Yeah, that's in there. So now you can actually see if we review those four conditions. I have that one. This one, make sure they're all there. There's occupants 1. Open this occupancy on 2 and occupancy on 4 on both lines. So you notice how I had FS1. Let's open up this where it actually creates the macro. And that's this and3 macro. So how that works is, remember, and3 is if I hold this down, I can actually review what and3 is. So I'm going to hold it down here and it opens up here. So it just basically says is if line 2 is occupied. That means line 2 is the train that I want to release with this condition. So scrolling, come on. So that means that I can take the signal at line 2 and set it up as the next step. So this question mark basically means is if both of these factors match the layout, then it's actually, I can now let the train on line 2 proceed, which is the position setting that we want to do. And that's basically that control. So this is going to be, we'll call it, my caps lock on. This is a weird thing. I just found out I can't get out of caps lock mode. C2. Go. So that's what we're just going to rename that event. Oh, come on. Can't close the window.
The caps lock makes it easier to read because the text is a little bit bigger.
Is it? Okay. So let me get this back into view. This is a weird scrolling bug that I've noticed just started a pop-up. It could be because I'm using it on the computer. So close that. And let me generate events for each of those. So like if I generate a new event, we're going to add an event. And I want to now, this is how this first one works. Remember we had and3 in the first one. I can actually just take this event and put it right into the event itself. And this is what we call nesting events. See, this is occupancy, this should be occupancy 1. And you notice here I didn't trigger anything. We're not setting a trigger in these events, right? So these are manual functions that we're using here. So this is because occupancy 1 is set, I want to make sure it's signal 1 that's going. So this should be fairly easy to figure out. Okay. Close that. And we'll create a third event. Now the third event, we're going to use and 1 because there's no trains waiting and it's okay for both of those signals to go green. So when I add the event, so we'll just label it as no trains. Trains. And we're going to nest and one here. And in this sense, I can actually let both signals go to green. So, and it doesn't matter the order here. Change the position so that they switch to green. Okay, and it won't reflect here because we're just setting up events. So let's do that. Come on, close that. And now for the final one, it gets a little tricky. And that's usually the hard one that we got to figure out. So what I am going to do is we're going to actually set it up so that whatever train gets released will be at random so that we don't have two trains entering at the same time. So how I'm going to actually approach this is I'm actually going to set up a random control here. So I'm going to add a new macro, and it's going to be the macro random. And what this will do is it will actually release one of these two events. It won't do both. It will only select one of them. Okay, so signal 1 and signal 2 will go green. So that'll be my random function. And then now I need to create the actual event that gets triggered. Or I need to set up the actual event. So remember, this is based on the and for state, which is, I hold it down, it's when both trains are waiting at the line. I only want to allow one of them to release. I don't want to allow both of them to release because obviously we'll have a collision. So this is basically asking is if both of these are going to set. And then we're actually now we're going to take that. Let's see if I can close this out so it's not open. Yeah, sorry, once it's open. So now we're actually going to take that new random function. Come on. You see how moving stuff around, you got these nice icons that we can look at, but then it's harder for us to get on screen sometimes. And this is the random function here. So if I drag the random function, now it will select one of those trains. And that's that event there. And that pretty much sort of closes out the events. And we can now sort of test it and see how it works. So let's close out the events.
Well, one question.
Yeah.
That the random function you just put in, that random macro.
Yeah.
Do you have to put the signal in there too, or is that nested in the other macros?
That's a good question. So this random, whenever you use random, it's only going to choose whatever you hear. So like if I put a turnout in here, for instance, then it's only going to select one of the three items. Like, is it going to turn
okay.
the lights?
I get it because you're using the signals to control the trains.
Yeah, the thing is, if you want to do two functions at once, we'll get into that in a second because that's a very good question. So let's kind of complete the task because I haven't quite completed the task yet. So remember, FS7 is sort of what it's sort of similar to the occupancy one. It actually didn't relabel itself like it did. So I have occupancy 1, 2, 1, 2. Oh, this is sorry, FS7. I should edit that. Edit it. This would be both trains. Trains. Okay. So just so we know. Now what we need to do is we actually need to go back to the triggered event, which is FS3. That's the one that we set. Close this out. It's the one where we set this signal to red because we want that to go red no matter what happens because it's being controlled by what this train is doing. So like if this was green and the function would actually turn that to red. Right now I'm in edit mode, so it's not going to do anything. So what we do now is we now can take all those conditions that we had, and you can tell what they are because they have the macros on here. So you know that these are sort of my conditions, or because we labeled them. So I can actually now take these and drag them into my event stream like this. So I have a bunch of nested events. Now, even though you would think they would all trigger because each of those has conditions that are unique to each other. Only one of these is going to activate, even though they're all in this event sequence. So this basically now should work as suggested. It's always weird when I do these because it's just like showing your layout. It works perfectly until you're trying to show somebody and then it doesn't work. So, all right. So here our condition is I have our 2 signals set for red. We got a train releasing here and I have no trains waiting. So if this works, once the train departs, it sets that to red and you see it sets both signals to green. All right. So now let's reset our conditions. We'll make them red again. Okay. And this time train 1 is going to be waiting. So a train comes up and it leaves, it goes red, and you see it release the signal on line 1. And if you follow the sequence completely, again, the train's moving through the signal, hits this, and it will change that to red if it wasn't red to begin with. So like it would be like this, it would hit that and it would change that to red. So we don't have anything colliding. Now we'll set up the third condition here. Let's get red. We'll default everything back here. And this time line 2 is occupied. So there's a little bit, this happens because there's an overlapping circle. If you notice here, and this is, you see how the square and the circle kind of can overlap like this. If I click on this section right here, it turns both of them. So, and this is just what we call hotspots. So this just, we don't need to think about that right now. So if this is occupied line 2, and the train comes along, you're going to see that the signal over here, the signal 2, will go green. And that's because the train is occupying here. Now, the final state is if they're both occupied, set that to red. And what's going to happen is one of them changed, not the other one, right? So you see there's one release green, right? I'll change that back to red and we'll hit this and see should react randomly. And sometimes, you can't tell with 2 items, it looks like it's repeating the same thing. And there goes the other one. But it doesn't release both trains. So that's a cool way to use the random function. It's just like, it's never going to set both. Now, again, if they're both green, once a train passes one of these, it sets the other signal red, right? So that pretty much covers it. Now, what we're going to cover again, I forgot what we were talking about earlier, Rick.
I just woke up.
Yeah, I forgot what we mentioned. We're going to try to
cover. It was.
I got it.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right. So the random function, if you had something where you're using a brake module and a signal, then it gets a little confusing because then what you want to do is you need to actually create a container. So let's, just so we can kind of clarify what's going on here, let me just add a couple of sort of brake modules or things that we use as brake modules. So, whoops, where is it? Is it the common? Yeah, it's the K84s. So we'll add a K84 to them. Okay, so let's just put those on the layout so that I have somewhere to grab. Ugh, go away. Let's see, edit trackboard page. I see we have a question as well. So I'm just going to put them.
He's saying, shouldn't you be switching the switch as well? But this is just a demo to show you how the signaling works. It isn't actual physically where you need to turn a turnout.
Yeah, there's 2 ways you can look at it. Because the trains are going into the frog, there's really no reason to actually have to switch.
Because they're spring loaded.
It does help, but I mean, it's not really necessary. But that's a good question. If you want to do that, and that will actually apply to what I'm setting up here, is when you have multiple actions that you need to occur at the same time. So what I will do is I will create add an event. Okay, and then we'll just call it sequence one. Sequence one. Okay. So get rid of this. Close that so I can hide the sequence. And actually, you know what? We'll do this with the turnout too. So the first sequence is we want the signal on line 1 to go red. We want to break, and this isn't in proper order. Usually I would set the brake first to ensure that whatever is going to stop is going to stop. Am I doing this right? Yeah, I am doing this right. So if I want to release the train, I would actually release the signal first, and then I would release the braking module to make sure that nothing collides. And then depending on what we want to do, you can add the turnout first or last. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so that's our first sequence. And again, this is a manually controlled function. So now we will add a second one. And do this, we'll call this sequence 2. We'll shorten it so I don't have to type out the whole thing. That's how lazy I want to get. So
I just think you can't spell it twice.
That might be true. Okay, and then what we'll do is, let me just scroll this up so I can access it. So this is now going to be sequence 2. Signal that one, and then we'll do this. And this time, yeah, and this time it's going to change this way. All right, so that's our second one. Then what we can do is we go back to our random function here. See if we can locate it. We'll open up the random function, and we will actually delete these. Go away. And this time we'll actually put in sequence 1 or sequence 2. Close that out. And now we can test it. So we'll set our defaults here. We got train stopped. Okay. And we got this one going green. And it looks like, oh, that's because there's nothing.
There's nothing there, but your brakes are on.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you have
So let's actually make them.
You have your aspect backwards on your brake module.
Yeah. So let me. Let's do this again. So we got trains waiting. Try it out. Okay. So you can see it releases that train. It releases the brake module so the train can actually go through, and then it will reach that turnout. So we'll reset that again. See if we can get it to act on the other line. Nope. There you go. You see how it released the brake and it changed the turnouts. So you can use nesting. That's the benefit of nesting. You can kind of control sequence events. Just be aware that when you're nesting things, you want to keep track of what each thing is supposed to be doing. Having a log to actually write down the steps might make it clearer for you to glance at it, because if not, then you have to open up each of these and figure out what it's doing. And that can be kind of tedious when you're trying to troubleshoot. You're going to see these numbers up here. It's probably because, there's events that are either waiting or they match some of the events that are in these, but it doesn't really matter because, your control is basically how you're activating events. And so that's, you should not be switching the switch as well. It's debatable. You can or you can't. It's really up to you. It's up to the user. So. Anyways, kept it relatively short. So, hopefully that kept you guys riveted to your chairs.
Hopefully that confused you guys enough to ask questions.
Yeah, but again, look through the article. It's a little bit more explained in part. I covered pretty much everything, but that's the short of it. We did. In the initial run that we did this, when I had it on the layout and Rick came out, we didn't have the randomizing function, and it made for confusing issues. I had to give priority to one line or the other, and sometimes you'd actually have a train that would wait as several trains would pass by, and it would never take off.
I
So
like that. That was fun.
it was an interesting loop, but you know, I got a little OCD with it, and I got tired of seeing
That
little.
was that was with the CS2 though,
That
correct?
was with the CS2, and it's like you got little plastic people getting annoyed at you that complaining the railroad line
I
that
don't know. I
it's
liked
taking
it.
so long. I've been sitting here for half an hour.
I know. I know. Well, the train leaves on a schedule, buddy.
So,
So I did like that feature. I liked that it sat there and you never knew how long it was going to sit there.
for railway safety reasons, both signals 1 and 2 should not be set both green at the same time. Checking condition is not necessary. Um,
Well,
yeah, I'm not
maybe
a
in
railroad
Germany.
operator, but I suppose that's true. So, and it really is, it's just like the way you might assume it is some kind of a branch line, but I actually used it to intersect sort of two separate loops. And there would be two of those sort of structures, one for entering one line and one for going on the other line. Um, but it's just like safety operations different everybody, and considering I'm a hobbyist, I have no safety regulations other than I don't want to see my trains crash into each other. So, and it's like, well, technically not correct. It's actually more fun to watch signal lights change aspects from time to time. So, anyways, any other questions or comments?
Yeah. Referring to the MU set. I don't know if we've ever covered that in a newsletter article. That's a good article for you. MU set.
Yeah, I thought we addressed it at one point. I mean, we didn't really cover it in depth. Multi-unit trains, they do have certain drawbacks. Um,
Yeah, well, I've thought about this condition where it's different trains, different decoders, different types of motors in it in an MU set, and my brain goes to, well, I don't really want to tune these things in perfectly together, even if it's possible. Um, my kind of thought is if I'm going to do an MU set, I'm going to use two of the same kind of locomotive, make it simpler, because then you don't have to worry about that. They won't run exactly the same, but they'll be close enough to not have to worry about it. I'm not
yeah,
sure
I
if that's
mean,
the
even
answer to
when
the
you have
question.
multi-unit sets that have the same motors, I don't think they would identify. They don't run exactly at the same speeds,
No,
anyways. So
no,
you've always got a little bit of a push or a pull. Um, It's okay when you're actually sort of manually controlling, is what I'd say, because from the controller, you're actually sending out digital commands to adjust the train speed and whatnot. But when you're actually using automation functions like I did in the example here, you do kind of run into certain issues that, like if you're using a brake module, the brake module stops the first train in analog mode, but it will not affect the second train if it doesn't reach that brake module section. So essentially, the first train will stop, but
the
then the
second
second
push.
train will push it right through. And it's possible it's going to push that first train past your emergency stop section and then pull the train out. So it doesn't really work as well because a brake module is an analog construct, not a digital construct that actually controls the actual train.
Right.
So that was a good question. Glad you
Yeah.
asked that. Anyways, anything else? Do we have any other news? Should we do
No.
a little
Yeah. Let's
what's
do.
in the bag?
No. Let's do. Look what I got. I
What
want
look
to.
what I got, or
I
what's
want
in
to
the
do
bag?
it before you because yours are normal, but mine's special. We both Curtis and I we have the same taste. We both like the same thing in trains usually, um, and so we obviously order a lot of the same things because we like them. And what we've been doing is ordering the MHI or the dealer cars. How can I Okay, and these are the dealer cars for this year. But you'll notice the bottom one, Curtis. See, mine's a factory error.
Yours is what?
Mine,
Oh, yours is a no. You sure? You just put it in the box upside down.
no, they actually packaged it upside down, so it's not really an error.
Way to go, dork. Nice try. Here, look, mine's upside down too.
Oh, both of them! Wow, they even printed the box upside down.
They put it in the box upside down.
And the other look what I got for me, because Curtis isn't ready. I got the Italian set with the baggage car this time. These are different, numbered differently now. Because back when you in the 60s when they came out with this, the 4036, there was only one car, and you would have to buy duplicates to make up the set. These are numbered differently now. They're still the tin plate, and it comes with a baggage car. When I was at the factory, I saw the flat printed sheets of some of these outside of Yonko's office. Some of the samples, so that's a nice. And I already got the locomotive, the new locomotive for it too. But yeah, that's a look what I got. What'd you get?
I didn't really have a whole lot. I mean, I do have a double. I do have that N car for the ICE, which is a bi-level. I haven't received the rest of the order. That's the other trains that go with it because I'm running this with the white 103, the intercity. I got to tell you, when you see a white train with this simple red stripe, it looks pretty cool on a layout. So
Yeah, I couldn't afford it, so I couldn't get that set. I wanted it. You also got the other one.
yeah, I got a couple of things. I got the tamper. I do kind of want to cover for anybody who's sort of interested in sort of like the DC Comics world or comics world. They basically have superhero sets, car sets, but they do have a startup, and this is the Black Adam one for sort of DC's new movie. It's called Black Adam, and the reason why I'm pointing this out is because it's only really available through the Startup Club. So this one's kind of unique. If you're really kind of hunting for it, it comes with a little metal figurine in there. Um, just something to keep an eye out for if you want a rarity, and that's just really for the club members. The other thing, which we really haven't shown, I know Rick got his a while ago, and I had mine was due to second shipment delays, is the tamper car. So I have yet to pull this thing out of the box, but this should be pretty exciting to watch. I think Rick actually didn't you take a video of yours?
I did a brief video on mine. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is very very cool. I mean, again, it's like the Goliath crane. Absolutely no use, but it's really cool.
Yeah. I've got to remember this. I had that. Remember, I got that Leonard Weiss maintenance card, the one with the catenary maintenance card,
Hmm.
little motorized. But it doesn't come with. There's no. That one I think had a coupler on it, but one of them didn't have any couplers. I don't think you could put couplers on it, and it just runs by itself. So you're not really hauling anything with it. So
Yeah, you're not going to put a little plastic guy up and fix your catenary,
yeah.
but it is a cool machine. I
Um,
guess that's it for look what I got. We can answer this
I
question.
think that's pretty much it. We do have a question, which is the best app for iPad to run trains? Um, Back in the day with the CS2, they had what they called the main station app. That was the one you wanted to use, but you can no longer find it through the App Store. That's the second time I've noticed it was pulled. The first time it was pulled, we were still able to retrieve it. It might have been an archive retrieval through Apple. But other than that, really all you need to do is just use the IP number of the Central Station 3. I will explain how to get to that. So
Yeah,
if
basically it's
you,
free. You don't need to buy an app.
yeah, there's nothing, it's just basically browser based. And I will show you how that works here. So let's first of all go to the screen. So in your Central Station 3, you do need to plug it into your router first before you power it up. Otherwise, it won't get an IP number. So the first thing you do is you go up to the system icon here on the top left. And you can close this panel if you want, or you can scroll down to where is it? Device and software. No, it's not that one. It's the settings Ethernet. Now it's going to be labeled differently if you haven't been keeping up with your software updates, because it's they might feel that they don't have their English right, and so we don't bother to correct them. But they have changed its name. I think at one point it was just said IP or something, but it's the settings for the Ethernet. And then you want to make sure your IP address is populated. If it's blank, then you are not connected properly to the router, or you started your CS3 up before you actually plugged in the router. The router needs to be plugged in before you power up the CS3. So just take note of these numbers here.
Now, everybody, if you type that into your browser right now, you can control Curtis's Central Station 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like you could look up at the sky at the Batman logo. I'm sure you guys don't know what we're referencing. It's an inside joke there. Okay, so at that point, then we can actually go to a browser and let me pop open a blank page here. Let's see if we can do this here. We'll change screens. And we'll just show, I would just prefer to show the window. This one here. Okay, and you can just basically type in that IP number, 192.168.
Nope, you got an extra one there.
Oh, yeah, I'll get rid of it. 55. Thanks. So you just type in your IP number. And you're going to have two areas that you can go to. If you just really want to operate the trains, you can click on the control button and we'll actually open up a browser. Just to give it a minute. It's just reading the information. It might ask you for the licensing. You got to click it once, and then you actually will have to click it again because it's a different kind of thing. And then now it's connecting to the CS3. And you can now operate the locomotive this way. Before they used to have limitations where you couldn't actually do any editing. It still kind of holds true to some degree, but this is probably the best way to operate your system this way. The other method is, and we'll close this app here. Let's see if I can do this. Let's actually go backwards. We're going to go, you click under system and you're going to see screen server. And again, you'll have to go through licensing agreements now.
This is just for your computer, not for your tablet.
Yeah, this is, but you can, I don't know if you can actually do this.
I've tried it and haven't been able to figure it out. And I keep meaning to ask you about it, see if we can figure it out.
Yeah, I don't think I have, but the problem here is you actually have to use a real VNC viewer. You want to use this link. You don't want to go to Real VNC and download it from their website, because then you'll be paying for a client. Whereas this one here is a free to use client. And that's what you're actually seeing me do in most of my train edits.
Right. Now I think we need to state that this is for your home PC use, and this is not really to control trains. This is how we show you what we're seeing in the central station. You can do editing, you can do modifications, you can do almost everything in the CS3, but you can't do it through your tablet or your smartphone in what he's doing now.
But if you do want to operate it just on your iPad, then you use that right-hand control button. That's this one here. Yeah. And, you can see it's just loading, and you're basically controlling your CS3. Which is, it's an interesting take that they're doing the MS, the mobile station 2. The benefit of the mobile station 2 is that you have, you have buttons that you're familiar with. But, if you want to operate through any kind of tablet, you can definitely do it this way.
Right, but you didn't have any kind of wireless if you only have a mobile station.
Yeah, right now, it's like until that other product comes out, this is your only wireless controller. So.
Well, you still can't use this if you only have mobile station. This is only if you have a central station.
Well, yes, of course. This is for a central station only. You can't do anything with the mobile station. So, was that his question? Did I miss that detail?
No, that was. Well, I guess it answered it, but
yeah. So. Okay, that about covers it. Unless we have any other questions you folks care to ask. So quickly check. We did not have any questions through YouTube. Yep, I think that about wraps it up for us.
Yeah, I think I'm happy with it.
Okay, well, thanks for visiting. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions, you can always
Rito?
send email at digital@marklin.com.
Rito had his hand up, but I think he put it down. So
Did he?
yeah, it's down now.
Okay.
So, all right, we'll assume there's no questions. So
Okay.
all right, guys.
Thanks again. We will see you in a couple of months.
Yeah.